This book is called The Temperaments and the Adult-Child Relationship, and it goes through, it's different than other temperament books because a lot of books that are written about the temperaments, although there are not many, they talk about each temperament and how that temperament acts. And this book takes it a little bit farther. As I've done a lot of counseling with homeschoolers and mothers, parents, people in healing work, a lot of people have asked me, well, you know, I'm this temperament and my child's this temperament, but then how do we interact together? So once people have that information about the temperaments, they want to take that a step farther. And so for many years I was doing personal consultations on this topic. And it occurred to me, just through thinking, but also through people asking me, is there something written about this? You know, what do you know about this? What can you tell me about this? And I saw the need for a book that would talk about not just the temperaments, but the interactions between them all. This book actually has 4 sections in the beginning that talk about each of the temperaments, and the book is 250 pages long. So just the beginning of the book is actually a very substantial, it could have been a book in itself. It's very detailed about what each temperament is like and how you can tell what temperament a person is, and the foods and different lifestyles they can have to balance their temperament. And then it takes it many steps farther in that it goes into 16 more additional sections, and each of those sections takes an adult temperament and pairs it with each of the 4 temperaments of a child. And the reason I made this the adult-child relationship is because it's a unique relationship. I've done a lot of counseling for people where I've counseled them. I've gotten the temperaments of everyone in their family. And you have a temperament between a woman and a man, or 2 women who are friends, or between the woman and her children. And it's a very different concept to see how the temperaments are going to react or interact with each other, parent to child or adult to child. It's different than adult to adult. So this book takes each adult, and it takes the melancholic adult and it pairs them with each of the 4 temperaments. And then it takes the sanguine adult and pairs them with each of the 4 temperaments, and it goes through all the temperaments. Each chapter has a section on the general relationship between the adult and the child. It has a section on helping the adult understand the child's temperament, that particular adult temperament, understanding that particular child's temperament. It has a section on the child understanding the adult's temperament and how you can help that to happen. And then it has another section on how you would best teach that temperament, how the discipline works with that temperament combination. And then at the end, there's a story that you can tell that helps, the point of the story is to help enhance the understanding and the relationship between the 2 people. And there are also activities within each chapter that help enhance the relationship. So maybe there'll be hands-on activities or form drawing activities or different activities that will help that particular temperament of adult enhance their relationship, make the relationship more, productive, more peaceful, more harmonious by using these activities and these stories. I had a lot of people, and I'm very responsive in some of the things that I do. People will say, well, I need this, and I'll say, okay, I can do this. And so that's what happened with this book, is so many of my clients were asking for this interactive evaluation. And then the last talk I gave online, people were just overwhelmingly saying, well, what about me as a choleric adult? How would I interact with these different types? Or me as a melancholic adult, how would I interact with these different types? And people really wanting those specifics to go more in depth with the temperaments. Well, what happened about a year ago was I had so many requests for people wanting to know how to evaluate their temperament. So just on a whim, I put a Facebook application up because Facebook was becoming popular at the time. And I put up an application that would help people evaluate their temperament by asking them a few key questions. And the application has about 1 million users right now. It became very popular and spread throughout Facebook. And I'm finding it's about 80% accurate. But some people will write to me after that and say, well, this didn't seem really very accurate. I think maybe I could be, one of each. Or other people will write to me and say, oh, that was so accurate. But it's just a fun way to do a little evaluation of yourself. Now, the book goes into a lot more detail. The online quiz is just a taste of something that, maybe you're an easy one to figure out, and these questions will work for you, and you'll get a right on, that's your temperament. And that works for a lot of people. But, if you need a little bit more in-depth look into what your temperament would be like, or how to figure out what your temperament is, then the book will really help with that when it describes each temperament and ways that you can tell. But that was sort of fun to have something that I created for people. You know, I was like, okay, instead of answering everybody's question individually, I'll just give them the questions, and it turned out that a lot of people liked that. I started studying the temperaments through healing, and the first healing modality that I became interested in was homeopathy. And so Samuel Hahnemann was very into the temperaments and spoke a lot about the temperaments, so I studied the temperaments from that point of view. I was very interested in the idea of each homeopathic remedy being a different temperament, because that went beyond the idea of just the 4 temperaments, and it was each remedy being a different temperament. Then I was branched out into herbalism and natural healing. I lived in the Middle East for a while and studied Chinese medicine as well as Islamic medicine, and realized that these modalities of healing use 4 or 5 temperaments in their healing work, and so was, you know, very interested in how they were using that to do healing, you know, to balancing the temperament in the person on a physical level. Then when my children were born 15 years ago, I was introduced to Waldorf education when my first child was born, and I started researching from before she was born, started researching things and fell into Waldorf education, started reading more about the temperaments, and as she grew and, you know, as I became more involved in the community, I started realizing that there's so much you can do if you combine the temperaments that Steiner talked about, the temperaments that different people talk about, and you combine them with the healing aspect of the temperaments. And I was very fascinated with the topic of temperaments in general. And so I studied it, you know, through the homeopathy, through the herbs, through Steiner. And then after that, I became intrigued. Well, you know, people would say, well, this really reminds me of a quiz I took at work. So I thought, well, you know, that does. You know, these temperaments remind me of some of the quizzes you take that say, well, what personality type are you? And then other people would say, oh yeah, I studied something like that. I created a chart for my students, and the chart compares all the 4 temperaments at the top of the chart with all these different systems and what name in their system corresponds to each of the 4 temperaments. And I think we came up with 86 different correspondences. So that's how many people are using a temperament system of some kind, you know, and it doesn't matter what kind of temperament system they're using. All of these temperament systems are related in some way, and they're just another way to look at people and, you know, help you understand each other better, help people understand each other better. And there's not just one system. The system I work with is the system of the phlegmatic, the choleric, the sanguine, and the melancholic. And there are other names for it though, and they do correspond together. I get a lot of really positive feedback about the temperament work I do. I think with maybe 100% of the people I work with, something very positive, something shifting happens within them when they get this perspective. And I would wonder about that, you know, the feedback. Oh, it's just, why so much good feedback? But the thing, I've experienced that myself. When I first started using the temperaments with my family, with my relationships, it was amazing. It shifted my whole life. It helped me so much with my children, with my relationships. The more I used it, the more I gained insight into each person. And so when people say this has changed my life, I can really connect with that myself. I'm not just standing there on the outside as the healer going, oh, I'm so glad I changed your life. No, it's deeper for that than me. When people say this changed my life, I say, yeah, I know. I mean, this changed my life, you know, and I'm so glad I can share that with you. And I've had people, so many different stories. I could tell so many stories. One story that happened to me a long time ago was, and I think this was what really encouraged me to keep going with this interest, was one woman came to me. She had been pretty much ostracized by her family, and so many things were happening to her, and she felt like she was just a failure and she just didn't fit in. And she came to me for healing because she was having health problems. And I took her temperament evaluation first, and we were talking, and she got distracted. She didn't want to talk about the healing for a while. She was fascinated with her temperament. She said, well, tell me more about my temperament. So I told her for about an hour. I told her about her temperament. I printed out some information for her, and you could just see this shift happening in her, like this light coming back in her eyes, and it was amazing. It was one of the most amazing transformations I've seen. She went from being on medication and being absolutely miserable, depressed all the time, to a year later she was writing to me saying that her life had been completely changed, and that she actually wasn't on medication anymore. She was more confident, and that she hadn't wavered from that. That basically once that shift happened, it had happened, and she didn't just feel better and then go back to feeling bad again. That was what she needed to hear. She needed to know who she was, and she was having trouble grasping that, especially in a society and in a situation where the people around her didn't understand that either, and they were expecting her to be another temperament, you know, and she wasn't. And so that was really helpful. And then, of course, there's so many stories of parents who have I'll be talking about their child's temperament, and all of a sudden they'll say, that's why they do that. You know, and once that light goes on as a parent, and I know how it feels, once you realize why the child is doing something, those worries start to fall away, the judgment starts to fall away. You know, you can't say, oh, I'm so worried about them, or oh, they're such a bad child. You can't say those things because you realize the why and what's going on then. If you'd like to purchase the book is available at www.thetemperaments.com. And right now that particular website link goes into a link that you can directly purchase the book or the ebook. Now in the future, the website's going to include some interactive tools that you can use to discover your own temperament. It will include some stories and some extra activities, and people who've purchased the book can get into some parts of the site where they'll have some extra materials. And that link, the Temperaments, will automatically go to that new website. So that's just a website that's going to be linked to wherever the book is right now. So whenever you see this video, or whenever you feel like, oh, this is the time I need to buy this book, you can always find it at thetemperaments.com.